The number on Domitila Amerson's laptop screen hadn't changed in 47 minutes. $39,999,999. $1 short. Her finger hovered over the keyboard, cursor blinking in the wire transfer amount field. All she had to do was type 1.00 and hit enter. $1 from her personal account. Then she'd have 40 million. Then she could file the lawsuit that would destroy Jackson Pharmaceuticals, obliterate Frederick Jackson's reputation, and deliver justice to 847 families who'd buried loved ones because of one drug. Then she'd lose the only man she'd ever loved. Dom's left hand clutched her father's dog tags, the metal worn from 2 years of constant contact against her chest. Marcus Amerson. O positive. Catholic. The embossed letters had nearly worn smooth under her thumb from all the nights she'd rubbed them like a rosary, praying for the strength to finish what she'd started. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered to the empty Sedona hotel room. "I'm so damn sorry." Through the window, Cathedral Rock blazed crimson in the October sunset, those same red rocks where she'd met Frederick Jackson 7 months ago. Where neither of them had any idea who the other really was. Where she'd laughed for the first time since the funeral, and he'd looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd stopped asking years ago. Her phone buzzed against the desk. Nina. Again. Third time in an hour. "Nina Laurent, Dom, please call me. We need to talk about this." "Nina Laurent, you don't have to choose between justice and your heart." "Nina Laurent, there's another way. Please." Dom silenced the phone and turned it face down. Nina meant well, she always meant well, but she didn't understand. There was no other way. Either Dom completed her mission, filed the class action lawsuit that would eviscerate Jackson Pharmaceuticals and everyone responsible for her father's death, or she chose the man whose company had killed 847 people. Including Marcus Amerson. Age 62. Decorated veteran. Beloved high school art teacher. The man who taught her to see beauty in broken things. Dead from an OxyRenew overdose, 5 months after his first prescription. Dom minimized the wire transfer window and opened a hidden folder on her laptop, Operation Memory Garden, confidential. 2 years of meticulous work. 23 private investors who believed they were funding an ambitious art installation. 47 victim families contributing what they could, 500 here, 2,000 there, because they wanted justice even more than she did. 15 anonymous donors who'd lost spouses, children, parents to Jackson Pharmaceuticals, breakthrough pain medication. Shell companies in Delaware and Nevada. Art exhibition cover stories. Fundraising galas in Charleston and Savannah where she'd smiled and discussed sculpture concepts while secretly planning corporate destruction. $39,999,999 raised. Legal team hired and ready, $12 million allocated. Media campaign prepared, $8 million budgeted. Private investigators with damning evidence, $5 million invested. Victim compensation fund, $15 million reserved. Everything she'd learned in 24 months of transformation, priceless. How to talk to venture capitalists. How to structure untraceable LLCs. How to read pharmaceutical company quarterly reports and find the lies between the numbers. How to become the kind of woman who could take down a billionaire. She'd become that woman. Cold, calculated, unstoppable. Then she'd fallen in love with the billionaire himself. Stupid, Dom muttered, slamming the laptop closed. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Her reflection stared back from the darkening window, a 35-year-old black woman with locks twisted into a crown, her mother's cheekbones, her father's stubborn jaw. She barely recognized herself anymore. 2 years ago, she'd been a struggling sculptor with clay under her fingernails and her father's laugh echoing through her tiny Brooklyn apartment every Sunday dinner. Now she was, what? A warrior? A fraud? A woman in love with her enemy who wasn't supposed to be lovable? All of the above. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against the wooden desk despite being silenced. Dom flipped it over, expecting Nina's fourth attempt. Not Nina. Frederick, dinner tomorrow night? I have something important to ask you. Dom's heart forgot how to beat. 7 months. March to October. Spring to fall. Stranger to lover to, whatever they were now. She'd told herself she could do this when Nina first recognized him at that gallery opening in April. Get close to him. Learn his weaknesses. Find the cracks in his armor. Confirm he was the monster she needed him to be so she could destroy him without guilt. Except Frederick Jackson wasn't a monster. He was complicated in ways that made her head hurt. Haunted by something he wouldn't name, something that pulled shadows across his gray eyes when he thought she wasn't watching. Generous to strangers, she'd seen him hand a homeless man outside Tlaquepaque not just cash but his jacket, his actual jacket, on a cold March evening. patient with her silences when grief ambushed her without warning. He photographed sunsets like a man trying to capture proof that beauty still existed. He knew the Latin names of desert flowers because his mother had loved gardening before she died. He'd held Dom while she cried on the anniversary of her father's death, August 14th, and never once asked why that date shattered her. Because if he'd asked, she would have had to lie. She'd been lying for 7 months anyway. And now he had something important to ask her. Dom stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Something important. What did that mean? A proposal? No, too soon, even for Frederick's intense certainty about everything. A trip together? Meeting his family? Did billionaires have family, or just lawyers and accountants? Or maybe, her stomach twisted, maybe he'd finally discovered who she really was. She looked at the dog tags in her palm. At the laptop hiding $39,999,999. At the message from the man she loved despite every logical reason not to. Her thumbs moved before her brain could intervene. Dom, tomorrow sounds perfect. Where? She hit send before she could stop herself. Then she opened the laptop again and stared at the number that had defined 730 days of her life. 47 minutes became 48. 49. The cursor kept blinking. 7 months earlier. March 15, 2024. Cathedral Rock Trail, Sedona, Arizona. The trail was supposed to be empty at 6:14 a.m. Dom had specifically chosen this ungodly hour to avoid other hikers, tourists, anyone who might want to make conversation when all she wanted was to climb until her thighs burned and her mind went quiet. Nina's gallery opening wasn't until 7 p.m. She had the whole day to get lost in red rocks and silence. But the man sitting on the boulder at the first overlook clearly hadn't received that memo. He was white, maybe mid-30s, wearing trail-worn hiking boots and a gray Henley that had seen better days. Nothing about him screamed, billionaire CEO. No flashy watch. No perfect hair. Just a guy with a camera around his neck, staring at the sunrise like it owed him an explanation. Dom considered turning around. Finding another trail. She wasn't in the mood for small talk with some photographer who'd probably ask to take her picture because her locks looked so interesting against the red rocks. But Cathedral Rock was her spot. Her father had brought her here when she was 12, the one and only family vacation they'd ever afforded, and she'd promised herself she'd come back someday. She wasn't letting some stranger claim it. She kept climbing. The man looked up as her boots crunched gravel. His eyes were gray, not blue-gray or green-gray but actual gray, like storm clouds deciding whether to rain. Something in them flickered when he saw her. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition, though she was certain they'd never met. Sorry, he said, standing and stepping aside. I'll get out of your way. You're not in my way. The words came out sharper than she intended. 7 months of planning, 3 sleepless nights preparing for Nina's show, 2 years of grief, it all made her edges jagged sometimes. He raised an eyebrow but didn't leave. You're up early. So are you. Couldn't sleep. He gestured at the horizon, where the sun was painting the rock formations in shades of amber and rose. Figured I'd watch something beautiful instead of staring at the ceiling. Dom almost smiled. Almost. That's either poetic or depressing. Probably both. He extended his hand. Frederick. She hesitated for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to notice his palm was calloused, his handshake firm but not aggressive, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that felt almost uncomfortable. Domitila, she said. Most people call me Dom. Domitila. He said it slowly, like he was tasting the syllables. That's beautiful. Brazilian. My grandmother. She was from Salvador. Dom pulled her hand back, unsettled by how warm his grip had been. You know Brazil? I know names. He smiled, just slightly, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his entire face. Made him look younger. Less haunted. My mother was obsessed with etymology. The meaning of things. And what does Frederick mean? Peaceful ruler. His smile turned wry. She had high hopes. Did you live up to them? The question hung in the pre-dawn air. Something shifted behind his gray eyes, a door closing, or maybe opening. Dom couldn't tell which. Not yet, he said finally. But I'm working on it. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun climb higher, turning Cathedral Rock from shadow to flame. Dom's heartbeat had slowed somewhere in the conversation, the jagged edges of her mood smoothing without her permission. This man was a stranger. She shouldn't feel comfortable standing next to him. She did anyway. So, Frederick said, lifting his camera, do you want to see something most tourists miss? I'm not a tourist. Neither am I. He pointed toward a narrow gap between 2 boulders, nearly invisible unless you knew to look. There's a second overlook through there. No trail markers. No Instagram influencers. Just, the best view in Sedona. Dom should have said no. She had a schedule. A mission. A gallery opening to prepare for and a war to wage. But her father's voice echoed in her memory, "Baby girl, sometimes the universe puts something beautiful in your path. Don't be too stubborn to see it." "Show me," she said. Frederick's smile widened, still subtle, still restrained, but genuine. "Follow me." The hidden overlook was everything he'd promised. A flat expanse of red rock jutting over a valley so vast it made Dom's breath catch. No guardrails. No crowds. Just endless sky and ancient stone and the kind of silence that felt sacred. "How did you find this place?" she asked, settling onto the sun-warmed rock beside him. "I've been coming to Sedona for years. Every quarter, sometimes more. It's the only place I can." He stopped. Shook his head. "Sorry. You don't need my life story. Maybe I want it." Where had that come from? Dom barely knew this man. But something about the way he looked at the landscape, hungry and grateful at the same time, made her want to understand. Frederick was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "I run a company. A big one. Sometimes the weight of it?" He trailed off, watching a hawk spiral overhead. "I come here to remember that I'm small. That the rocks were here before me and will be here after. That whatever mistakes I make, the world keeps turning." Mistakes. The word snagged on something in Dom's chest. What kind of mistakes? He turned to look at her, really look, not the superficial glance most people offered. His gray eyes were searching, almost desperate. The kind that keep you awake at 6 a.m. watching sunrises because you can't face your own ceiling. Dom understood that. God, she understood it. "My father died 2 years ago," she heard herself say. "Some days I still wake up thinking he's in the next room, ready to make me his terrible coffee and argue about whether Basquiat was a genius or a con artist. Which did he think? Genius. Obviously." She smiled despite the grief pressing against her ribs. "He was an art teacher. He saw genius everywhere. Even in me." "Are you? A genius?" "I'm a sculptor. I make things out of broken pieces." She picked up a pebble, turned it in her fingers. "Whether that makes me a genius or just stubborn, I haven't decided yet." Frederick laughed, unexpected, warm, startled out of him like he'd forgotten he could make that sound. Dom stared at him. She'd made this stranger laugh. She'd also laughed, or almost laughed, more in the last 20 minutes than she had in 2 years. Something dangerous was happening here. Something she couldn't afford. She stood abruptly. "I should go. I have a gallery opening tonight." "Here in Sedona?" "Plaque. My friend owns a gallery. She's showing some of my pieces." Frederick rose too, brushing red dust from his jeans. "What time?" 7. Dom hesitated. "Why?" "Because I'd like to see your work." His voice was steady, but something underneath it trembled, hope or fear, she couldn't tell which. "If that's okay." It wasn't okay. It was the opposite of okay. She was in Sedona on reconnaissance, scouting locations for the Memory Garden installation that didn't actually exist, using Nina's show as cover for her presence. She couldn't get tangled up with some handsome photographer who made her laugh and asked about her father and looked at her like she mattered. "It's open to the public," she said, which wasn't yes but wasn't no. Frederick nodded slowly. "Then maybe I'll see you there." "Maybe." She turned and walked back toward the hidden gap between the boulders, feeling his gaze on her back the entire way. Her heart was beating too fast. Her palms were sweating. This was a complication she didn't need. But as she climbed down Cathedral Rock alone, the sunrise warming her face and her father's dog tags cool against her chest, Domitila Amerson couldn't stop thinking about gray eyes and broken things and a stranger who understood sleepless dawns. Present day. October 2024. Dom's laptop chirped with a new email notification. She'd been staring at the $39,999,999 for over an hour now, her hotel room dark except for the screen's glow. Frederick's text about dinner tomorrow sat unanswered in her phone. She'd typed and deleted 4 responses before giving up. The email was from Nina. Subject: "I know you're ignoring me but read this." Dom: "I just left Harrison Chen's office." Frederick CFO: "Before you ask how I got a meeting, that's not important right now. What is important, Harrison knows who you are. He found your name on a victim's family's list. He's been investigating for weeks. I don't know if he's told Frederick yet, but it's only a matter of time. Whatever you're planning to do tomorrow night, be ready for anything. I love you. Be careful. N." Dom read the message 3 times. Harrison Chen knew. Which meant Frederick might already know too. Which meant that dinner tomorrow, "I have something important to ask you," might not be a proposal or a trip or any of the things she desperately hoped. It might be a confrontation. She looked at the dog tags in her hand. Her father's name catching the laptop's blue light. Then she opened the wire transfer window again. $39,999,999. $1 short. Maybe that's exactly where she needed to stay, suspended between justice and love, unable to complete either. Or maybe it was time to stop hovering. Dom's fingers moved to the keyboard. Dom shouldn't have said yes to dinner. She'd told herself 100 times during the week since Cathedral Rock that she wasn't going to see the gray-eyed stranger again. She had a mission. A timeline. A dead father who deserved justice, not a distracted daughter chasing butterflies in her stomach over some man who photographed sunrises. But Frederick had appeared at Nina's gallery opening exactly as he'd said he might, standing in front of Dom's centerpiece sculpture, a 7-foot bronze figure of a man dissolving into birds, titled Release. He'd stared at it for 11 minutes. She'd counted. When he finally turned and found her watching from across the room, his gray eyes had gone soft and wounded in a way that made her chest ache. "Your father," he'd said quietly. "This is about your father." Not a question. A recognition. And somehow, that recognition had led to exchanged phone numbers, which led to texted conversations that stretched past midnight, which led to this, a corner table at Mariposa with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Red Rocks, and Frederick Jackson sitting across from her looking like he belonged in a magazine spread about Arizona's most eligible bachelors. Dom had done her research by then. She knew who he was. Frederick Jackson. 37 years old. Founder and CEO of Jackson Pharmaceuticals. Net worth, $2.1 billion. The man whose company had created OxyRenew, the breakthrough pain medication that had killed her father and 846 other people before it was finally pulled from the market in late 2022. She should have run the moment Nina whispered his identity at the gallery opening. Instead, she'd smiled and said, "Tell me more about yourself." Now, watching him study the menu with the same intensity he'd given her sculpture, Dom reminded herself why she was here. Intelligence gathering. Learn his weaknesses. Find the cracks. "You're staring," Frederick said without looking up. "You're interesting to look at." Where had that come from? Dom felt heat climb her neck. This wasn't the plan. Flirting wasn't the plan. Frederick's lips curved, that subtle, restrained smile she was beginning to crave like oxygen. "Careful. I might start thinking you actually like me. Would that be so terrible?" He looked up then, gray eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. She held his gaze instead, refusing to flinch. "No," he said softly. "It would be the best thing that's happened to me in years." The server appeared, shattering the moment with cheerful descriptions of the night's specials. Dom ordered the Mole Negro without really hearing herself speak. Frederick chose a bottle of wine from Napa Valley, something about notes of blackberry and smoke, and when their glasses were filled he raised his toward her. "To unexpected meetings," he said. "To hidden overlooks." They clinked glasses. The wine was exquisite, of course it was, the man was a billionaire, but Dom barely tasted it. She was too busy cataloging details. The way Frederick's fingers wrapped around the wine glass stem, elegant but not delicate. The slight tension in his jaw when the conversation drifted too close to his work. The shadows that gathered behind his eyes when he thought she wasn't watching. Find the cracks, she reminded herself. Instead, she found herself saying, "Tell me about your mother." Frederick's hand stilled on his glass. "My mother? You mentioned her. On the trail. That she loved etymology." Dom leaned forward, genuinely curious despite her ulterior motives. What else did she love? The silence stretched. Dom wondered if she'd pushed too hard, too fast. Then Frederick exhaled slowly, something in his shoulders releasing. "Gardens," he said. "She grew roses in our backyard in Michigan. Nothing fancy, we couldn't afford fancy, but she'd spend hours out there, talking to them like they could hear her. Called them her therapy that actually works. Michigan." Dom filed that away. His public biography mentioned Michigan, but not this, not the roses, not the poverty implied by couldn't afford fancy. "I assumed you grew up with silver spoons and private jets. I grew up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to teach me the names of flowers." Frederick's voice carried no bitterness, only a tender grief Dom recognized intimately. "She died when I was 22. Cancer. We couldn't afford the treatment that might have saved her." Dom's breath caught. "Frederick. That's why I started the company." He met her eyes, raw and unguarded in a way that made her stomach clench. "I wanted to make medications affordable. Accessible. I wanted to make sure no one else lost their mother because they couldn't pay the hospital bills." The irony was so sharp it nearly drew blood. This man, this earnest, wounded man who'd built an empire to save people, had created the drug that killed her father. Dom took a long sip of wine, buying time to reassemble her face into something neutral. That's beautiful, she managed. Your mother would be proud. Something flickered across Frederick's features, guilt, maybe, or shame, so quickly she almost missed it. I hope so, he said quietly. Some days I'm not sure. Find the cracks. She'd found one. A massive one. Frederick Jackson wasn't a monster. He was a man haunted by something, carrying a weight he couldn't name, desperate to live up to a dead mother's hopes. Dom should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt sick. April 15, 2024. Red Rock Crossing, Sedona. Their 5th date. Or maybe their 6th, Dom had lost count somewhere between the sunset hike at Bell Rock and the afternoon wandering Tlaquepaque's galleries, Frederick asking endless questions about her artistic process like the answers actually mattered. Red Rock Crossing was her idea. A picnic spot her father had loved, where Oak Creek wound past Cathedral Rock and the water caught the light like scattered diamonds. This feels sacred, Frederick said, spreading a blanket on the creek bank. Like we should be whispering. Maybe we should. Dom settled onto the blanket, tucking her legs beneath her. Tell me a secret. She'd meant it lightly. Playfully. The kind of flirtation that felt safe. But Frederick went still, his hands freezing on the picnic basket. A secret, he repeated. Nothing too dark. Dom forced a laugh, though her heart had started racing. Just something you've never told anyone. Frederick was quiet for a long moment, watching the creek tumble over smooth stones. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible over the water. I made a mistake. A few years ago. He swallowed hard, his throat working. A business decision. I trusted people I shouldn't have trusted, signed off on things I should have questioned, and people. His voice cracked. People got hurt. Badly. Some of them died. Dom's lungs forgot how to function. He's talking about OxyRenew. He's confessing. She should press him. Demand details. Record this conversation as evidence. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "What happened?" I can't, Frederick shook his head sharply. I can't talk about specifics. Legal reasons. But I carry it. Every day. Every single day I wake up knowing that people are dead because I wasn't paying enough attention. Because I believed the wrong people. Because I failed. Tears glistened in his gray eyes. He blinked them back furiously, jaw tight with the effort of not breaking. Frederick. Dom reached for his hand before she could stop herself. His fingers were cold, trembling slightly. You can't carry that alone. Who else should carry it? His laugh was bitter, broken. I was the CEO. The buck stops with me. No matter what the board did, what they hid, ultimately, I'm responsible. What the board did. What they hid. Dom filed that away too, her investigator's instincts warring with something softer that wanted to pull this man into her arms and hold him until the shaking stopped. My father, she said slowly, carefully, used to say that guilt without action is just self-indulgence. It's what you do with the guilt that matters. Frederick looked at her, really looked, the way he had that first morning on Cathedral Rock. What would you do, he asked. If you were carrying something like this? I am carrying something, she thought. I'm carrying a $40 million plan to destroy you. I'd try to make it right, she said instead. Even if I couldn't undo the damage. Even if it cost me everything. I'd try. Frederick lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender, so unexpectedly romantic, that Dom forgot to breathe. You're extraordinary, he murmured against her skin. Do you know that? I'm just someone who lost her father and learned to keep going. That's exactly what makes you extraordinary. He leaned closer. Dom should have pulled back. Should have remembered the mission, the money, the 847 names on her list. But Frederick's eyes were asking permission, and her body was answering before her brain could intervene. Their first kiss tasted like oak and grief and something dangerously close to hope. When they finally separated, foreheads resting together, breath mingling in the space between, Dom felt a crack form in her own armor, hairline thin, but deep. This is a problem, she thought. This is a really big problem. May, July 2024. Sedona, Arizona. Spring melted into summer, and Domitila Amerson fell. She told herself it wasn't love. Couldn't be love. She was conducting reconnaissance, building trust, positioning herself for the eventual reveal. Every date was intelligence gathering. Every kiss was strategy. Except none of that explained why she started keeping a photograph of Frederick on her phone, one she'd secretly taken at Airport Mesa, his profile silhouetted against a tangerine sunset. Or why his laugh had become her favorite sound, startled and bright, like he was surprised joy still existed. Or why she'd started counting the hours between his texts, heart-lurching every time his name appeared on her screen. They hiked Boynton Canyon on a Tuesday in May, Frederick pointing out desert marigolds and Indian paintbrushes, reciting their Latin names in a voice that made her skin warm. They wandered the galleries at Tlaquepaque on a Thursday in June, Frederick buying a small ceramic piece from a local artist, not for himself but for Dom's mother, a woman he'd never met, because you said she collects blue things. They sat in the chapel of the Holy Cross on a Sunday in July, not speaking, just existing in the sacred silence while the red rocks blazed outside the windows. Frederick reached for her hand. Dom let him take it. That night, lying alone in her hotel room, she called Nina. "I'm in trouble," Dom said without preamble. "I know." Nina's voice was gentle, unsurprised. "You've been in trouble since March. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Love never happens like it's supposed to." "It's not," Dom stopped. Started again. "I can't love him. He's the reason my father is dead." "Is he, though?" Nina asked carefully. "Or is he just the man at the top of a company that did terrible things?" "There's a difference, Dom. He signed off on the drug. He approved the marketing." "Did he? Or did his board? His medical advisors?" Nina sighed heavily. "I'm not defending him. I'm just asking if you're sure you hate the right person." Dom stared at the ceiling, her father's dog tags digging into her chest. "It doesn't matter who I hate," she said finally. "What matters is justice. For Daddy. For all of them. And if justice means destroying the man you love?" Dom didn't have an answer. She hung up without saying goodbye. August 14, 2024. Airport Mesa, Sedona. The anniversary of her father's death. Dom had planned to spend it alone, visiting the red rocks that reminded her of him, crying where no one could see, then flying back to New York to sit with her mother and pretend she was holding it together. But Frederick had noticed the date circled on her phone calendar when she wasn't looking. And he'd shown up at her hotel room at 5 a.m. with coffee and hiking boots and a gentle question: "Would it help to not be alone today?" She should have said no. She said yes. They drove to Airport Mesa in silence, watching the sun rise over the red rocks in shades of amber and rose. Dom's cheeks were wet before they even reached the trailhead. Frederick didn't try to fix it. Didn't offer platitudes or silver linings. He just walked beside her, his presence solid and warm, catching her elbow when she stumbled on a loose rock, handing her tissues when she needed them. At the overlook, with the entire valley spread below them like a painting, Dom finally broke. "He was my best friend," she choked out. "My father. He believed in me when no one else did. He taught me to see beauty in broken things. He made terrible coffee every single morning and called me baby girl even when I was 33 years old, and he was the most annoying, wonderful, present person I've ever known, and then he was just gone." Frederick caught her as she crumpled, folding her against his chest, his arms tight and steady. "I know," he murmured into her hair. "I know, sweetheart. I know." She cried for 20 minutes. Maybe 30. Frederick held her through all of it, his heartbeat steady against her ear, his hands rubbing slow circles on her back. When the tears finally slowed, she pulled back to look at him, this man she was supposed to destroy, who had just witnessed her at her most broken. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me." His thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. "Grief isn't weakness, Dom. It's love with nowhere to go." Her heart clenched so hard she gasped. "Stop," she told herself. "Stop falling." But she was already gone. August 30, 2024. Airport Mesa, Sedona, sunset. They returned to the same overlook, 2 weeks later, under very different circumstances. Frederick had been quiet all day, distracted, almost nervous. Dom noticed him checking his pocket repeatedly, running his hand through his hair, starting sentences he didn't finish. "Are you okay?" she asked as they settled onto their usual rock to watch the sunset. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Of what?" "Of saying something I can't take back." He turned to face her fully, gray eyes fierce with an emotion that made her stomach drop. "Dom, I know we've only been, whatever this is, 4 or 5 months. I know you have your own life, your work, your grief that I can't fully understand. I know I'm probably reading this wrong, but He stopped. Took a breath. Reached for her hands. "I love you." 3 words. 3 impossible words. Dom stared at him, her entire world tilting on its axis. "He loves me," she thought numbly. "The man I'm planning to destroy just told me he loves me." She should run. Should confess everything. Should end this before it destroyed them both. Instead, she heard her own voice say, "I love you too." Because it was true. God help her, it was true. Frederick kissed her, fierce and tender and desperate, and Dom kissed him back with equal hunger, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Frederick pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. No, Dom thought. I don't deserve you. But she didn't say it. She just kissed him again and tried not to think about the $38 million already sitting in her war chest, waiting. September 28, 2024. Dom's hotel room, Sedona. The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. Dom was half asleep, Frederick's texts from earlier still warming her phone screen, something about a dinner reservation for October and something important to ask. She'd smiled at those texts like a fool in love, which was exactly what she was. Then her laptop pinged. Subject: Final transfer complete, Operation Memory Garden. Ms. Amerson. This email confirms receipt of the final investment tranche from the Thornton Family Trust. Total campaign funds now stand at $39,999,999. Please confirm authorization to proceed with Phase 2, legal team deployment, by October 15, 2024. Regards, your legal team. Dom read the email 4 times. $39,999,999. $1 short of her goal, a goal that no longer required her personal contribution since the Thornton transfer exceeded expectations by exactly $1 less than projected. She was there. After 2 years, 23 investors, 47 families, and 730 nights of planning, she was finally there. All she had to do was type one word: confirmed. Her legal team would spring into action. The lawsuit would be filed. The media campaign would launch. Jackson Pharmaceuticals would crumble, and Frederick Jackson would watch his empire burn. The man who loved her. The man she loved back. Dom stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Then she closed the laptop and picked up her phone. Frederick, can't stop thinking about tomorrow. There's something I need to ask you. Something that will change everything. Change everything. He didn't know how right he was. Dom typed and deleted 6 different responses before settling on. Dom, I can't wait. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. She hit send. Then she opened the laptop again, cursor hovering over confirmed. Outside, the Sedona moon hung full and bright over Cathedral Rock. Inside, Domitila Amerson sat suspended between the woman she'd been, a grieving daughter seeking justice, and the woman she'd become. A woman in love. A woman $1 short of destroying everything. A woman who had no idea that by tomorrow night, Frederick would know the truth, and nothing between them would ever be the same. Jackson Pharmaceuticals headquarters, Phoenix, Arizona. Harrison Chen had been Frederick's best friend for 15 years. They'd met at a venture capital conference in San Francisco when Frederick was 22 and broke, pitching a pharmaceutical company that didn't exist yet to investors who kept saying no. Harrison, already successful, already cynical, already exhausted by rich people who didn't know how to use their money, had listened to Frederick's pitch about affordable medications and dead mothers and flowers that needed naming. Then he'd written a check for $500,000 and said, "Don't make me regret this." Frederick never had. Until now. Harrison stared at the documents spread across his mahogany desk, his 38-year-old face suddenly looking a decade older. The afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, illuminating papers that shouldn't exist. Bank records. Shell company registrations. Investment prospectuses for something called the Memory Garden Project. Legal retainer agreements with Morrison & Associates, the most aggressive class action firm in the country. And at the center of it all, a name, Domitila Amerson. Daughter of Marcus Amerson, deceased August 14, 2022. Cause of death, opioid overdose. Medication, OxyRenew. Harrison picked up his phone, then set it down. Picked it up again. He'd run background checks on every woman Frederick had dated since the OxyRenew disaster. Not because Frederick asked, he never asked, but because Harrison had watched his best friend carry guilt like a second skeleton for 2 years. The last thing Frederick needed was someone who'd exploit that vulnerability. Domitila Amerson wasn't just someone. She was the architect of a $40 million campaign designed to destroy Jackson Pharmaceuticals from the inside out. Her investors included 3 other victim families, 2 anonymous whistleblowers, and, this was the part that made Harrison's blood run cold, the Thornton Family Trust. Elise Thornton's family trust. Frederick's ex-fiancée. The woman who'd tried to stop OxyRenew's approval in 2022 and been forced out of the company for her trouble. Harrison rubbed his temples, a headache blooming behind his eyes. This wasn't just a lawsuit. This was a coordinated takedown involving Frederick's past, his present, and everyone who'd ever tried to hold Jackson Pharmaceuticals accountable. And the woman running it had been sleeping with the target for 6 months. Harrison's phone buzzed. "Frederick, dinner with Dom tonight. I'm going to ask her to move in with me. Wish me luck." Harrison stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then he grabbed the documents and headed for his car. October 1st, 2024. Frederick's residence, Sedona. The folder landed on Frederick's kitchen counter with a sound like a gunshot. "What is this?" Frederick asked, though something in his gut already knew. Harrison's face was ashen. In 15 years of friendship, Frederick had never seen him look this devastated. "I need you to sit down," Harrison said. "I don't need to sit down. I need you to tell me what's in that folder." "Frederick. Tell me." Harrison exhaled slowly, the sound of a man delivering a death sentence. "Domitila Amerson," he said. Her father was Marcus Amerson, a high school art teacher from Brooklyn. Decorated veteran. Died 2 years ago. Frederick's stomach dropped. "She told me about her father. He died suddenly. He died from an OxyRenew overdose." Harrison's voice was gentle but relentless. 5 months after his first prescription. He was one of the 847. The number hit Frederick like a physical blow. 847, he'd memorized that number, carried it like a stone in his chest for 2 years. 847 people dead. 847 families destroyed. 847 ghosts that followed him everywhere. And one of them had a daughter named Domitila. "No," Frederick breathed. "No, that's not," she would have told me. "She didn't tell you because she came to Sedona to destroy you." Harrison opened the folder, spreading documents across the counter like a surgeon laying out instruments. Shell companies. Investment records. Legal retainers. She spent 2 years raising $40 million to fund a class action lawsuit against Jackson Pharmaceuticals. Against you personally. Frederick's hands were shaking. He gripped the counter's edge to steady himself, knuckles white. "There has to be a mistake." "I wish there was." Harrison pointed to a document near the bottom. The Thornton Family Trust contributed $2 million. Elisa's family. Your ex-fiancée who tried to stop OxyRenew and got fired for it. Elise, Frederick repeated numbly. Elise and Dom are working together? I don't know if they've met personally. But their money's in the same war chest. Harrison's voice cracked slightly. "Frederick, I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry." Frederick picked up a photograph from the folder, a surveillance shot of Dom at a restaurant, talking to a woman he didn't recognize. The date stamp read June 2024. A month after they'd started dating. She was smiling in the photo. That wide, luminous smile he'd thought was reserved for him. "She was playing me," Frederick said slowly, the words scraping against his throat like broken glass. "This whole time. Every conversation, every kiss, his voice broke. When I told her about the guilt. When I talked about the people who died. She knew. She knew. And she kept seeing me anyway. Kept." Frederick's laugh was sharp and broken. "She told me she loved me. 3 weeks ago. Airport Mesa. She said she loved me." Harrison had no answer for that. Frederick stared at the documents, his vision blurring. 6 months of memory cycled through his mind like a horror film played backward. Cathedral Rock. The hidden overlook. "Tell me a secret." Red Rock Crossing. Her hand in his. "Guilt without action is just self-indulgence." August 14th. Her tears soaking his shirt. "He was my best friend. He was my best friend, and your drug killed him, and I've been lying to you every single day since we met. What do I do?" Frederick asked, his voice small in a way it hadn't been since he was a child watching his mother cough blood into tissues. Harrison placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's up to you. But you need to know, the lawsuit is ready to file. Her legal team is waiting on her authorization. If she says yes, it's over. The company, your reputation, everything." "When?" "They gave her until October 15th to confirm." Harrison checked his watch. "That's 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks. 14 days to watch the woman he loved destroy everything he'd built. Or 14 days to decide what he was willing to lose." Frederick picked up the folder, clutching it like a lifeline. "I need time," he said. "I need to think. Take whatever time you need." Harrison paused at the door. "But Frederick? Whatever you decide, don't let her blindside you again. You deserve to face this on your own terms." Frederick nodded, not trusting his voice. After Harrison left, Frederick sat alone in his kitchen for 2 hours, reading every document in the folder until he'd memorized their contents. Then he opened his laptop and began his own research. October 3rd, 2024. Dom's Art Studio, Sedona. The sculpture wasn't cooperating. Dom had been working on it for 3 days, a new piece, smaller than her usual work, depicting 2 figures reaching toward each other across an impossible gap. She'd told herself it was about her parents, about the space left by loss. She knew it was about her and Frederick. Her phone buzzed with another text from Nina. "Nina, have you decided yet?" "Dom, no." "Nina, the legal team is getting antsy. They need an answer." "Dom, I know." "Nina, what's holding you back?" Dom set down her phone without answering. She knew what was holding her back. Every time she tried to type confirmed, she saw Frederick's face, gray eyes soft with love, hands gentle on her cheeks, voice rough with emotion saying I don't deserve you. Maybe he didn't. Maybe the man who'd signed off on OxyRenew deserved everything she'd planned for him. But the man who photographed sunsets and named flowers and held her while she cried about her father, that man felt like someone else entirely. Can they coexist? She wondered. Can a person be both the villain and the victim? Can you love someone and hold them accountable at the same time? Her father's dog tags clinked softly against her chest as she bent over the sculpture. What would you do, Daddy? But Marcus Amerson had been dead for 2 years, and he couldn't answer. Dom picked up her phone again. Dom, I'll decide by October 15th. I promise. Nina, Dom. Be careful. Harrison Chen knows who you are. He's been investigating. Dom's blood went cold. Dom, what? How do you know? Nina, I have sources. If Harrison knows, Frederick might too. You need to be prepared. Dom, prepared for what? Nina, for everything to fall apart. Dom stared at the message, her hands trembling. Frederick might already know. Might already be planning his own confrontation. The dinner he'd mentioned, something important to ask, might not be about moving forward at all. It might be about ending everything. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Frederick's name appeared. Frederick, can I see you tomorrow? There's something we need to discuss. In person. Dom's throat closed. Discuss. Not talk about. Not figure out together. Discuss. The word felt clinical. Surgical. Like a doctor preparing to deliver bad news. She typed her response with numb fingers. Dom, of course. My studio? 6 p.m.? Frederick, I'll be there. Dom set down the phone and looked at the sculpture, two figures reaching toward each other, frozen inches apart. She wouldn't finish it in time. Maybe that was appropriate. October 5th, 2024. Dom's art studio, Sedona, 6:07 p.m. Frederick was 7 minutes late. In 6 months of dating, he'd never been late. Not once. His punctuality was almost compulsive, something Dom had found endearing, then reassuring, then so familiar she'd stopped noticing. She noticed now. Her studio occupied a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Sedona, all exposed brick and soaring ceilings and natural light that made her sculptures glow. She'd filled it with half-finished pieces, bronzes and ceramics and twisted metal assemblages that told stories most people couldn't read. Frederick had always been able to read them. He understood my work, she thought. He understood me. And I was lying the entire time. The door opened. Frederick stood in the entrance, backlit by the dying October sun, his face completely unreadable. He wore the same clothes he'd worn on their first date, gray Henley, worn jeans, boots that had hiked every trail in Sedona. But his eyes were different. Hard. Guarded. Gone was the soft vulnerability that had made Dom fall in love with him. In its place was something she didn't recognize. You came, she said, and her voice sounded strange in her own ears. I almost didn't. Frederick stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His movements were careful, controlled, a man approaching a bomb he wasn't sure how to defuse. Spent the last 4 days trying to convince myself there was an explanation. A misunderstanding. Dom's stomach dropped. Frederick, tell me about your father. The words hit like a slap. Dom froze, her hand unconsciously moving to the dog tags beneath her shirt. My father? Marcus Amerson. Frederick's voice was eerily calm. High school art teacher. Decorated veteran. Died August 14, 2022. You told me all of that. I did. You left out the part where he died from an OxyRenew overdose. Frederick took another step closer, his gray eyes burning. The part where my company's drug killed him. Dom's breath caught. There it was. The truth she'd been running from for 6 months. Frederick, I can explain. Can you? He laughed, a broken, terrible sound. Can you explain why you've spent 2 years raising $40 million to destroy my company? Can you explain the shell corporations, the legal team, the media campaign you've been planning while telling me you loved me? How did you? Harrison found your name on a victim's family's list. Frederick's jaw was tight, tendons straining. He started digging. Found everything. The investors, the lawsuits, the Thornton family trust, my ex-fiancé's family contributed to your war chest, did you know that? Dom flinched. I didn't coordinate with Elise directly. But you took her money. Her family's money. To destroy me. Frederick's control finally cracked, his voice rising. Do you have any idea how that feels? Finding out the woman you love has been working with your ex to tear your life apart? I wasn't trying to tear your life apart. Dom shot back, her own composure shattering. I was trying to get justice. For my father, for 847 families who buried people because your company cared more about profit than safety. I didn't know. Frederick's eyes were wet now, tears gathering but not falling. The board hid the safety data. My medical advisors lied about the trials. By the time I found out what OxyRenew was doing, people were already dying and I couldn't. His voice broke. I pulled the drug. I shut down the division. I've been funding addiction treatment centers anonymously for 2 years because I couldn't live with what happened and I couldn't undo it either. Dom stared at him, her rage colliding with something softer, something that felt dangerously like understanding. You pulled the drug, she repeated slowly. The second I had confirmed data. The second I knew for certain. Frederick's tears finally spilled, tracking down his cheeks. I know it was too late. I know your father was already gone. I know nothing I do will bring him back, bring any of them back. But you tried. The words escaped before Dom could stop them. You actually tried to fix it. Not enough. Frederick wiped his face roughly with his sleeve. Never enough. Nothing is ever enough when 847 people are dead. They stood in silence, the space between them charged with 6 months of lies and love and grief. I was going to destroy you, Dom finally said. That was the plan. Get close, learn your weaknesses, confirm you were the monster I needed you to be so I could burn your empire to the ground without guilt. And? Frederick's voice was raw, scraped hollow. And you weren't a monster. Dom's own tears started falling. You were broken and guilty and kind and you held me while I cried about my father, the man your company killed, and you didn't even know why I was crying. I do now. I know. More silence. The sculpture of 2 figures reaching toward each other loomed between them like an accusation. Did you mean it? Frederick asked quietly. When you said you loved me? Dom wanted to lie. Wanted to rebuild her walls, retreat to the cold certainty of the mission she'd devoted 2 years to. But she was so tired of lying. Yes, she whispered. God help me, yes. I love you. I fell in love with you somewhere between Cathedral Rock and Red Rock Crossing and I couldn't stop falling no matter how hard I tried. Frederick closed his eyes, a sob escaping his pressed-together lips. Then why, he choked out. Why continue? Why not tell me? Because telling you meant choosing. Dom stepped toward him, her hands trembling at her sides. Telling you meant deciding between the man I love and the father I lost. Between my heart and 846 other families who are waiting for me to give them justice. And I couldn't choose. I still can't. So what happens now? The question hung between them like a blade. Dom thought about the email still waiting in her inbox. The legal team awaiting her authorization. The $39,999,999 that could finally deliver the justice she'd spent 2 years fighting for. She thought about Frederick's tears. His confession about pulling the drug. His 2 years of anonymous penance. She thought about her father, who'd always taught her that broken things could be beautiful if you assembled them with enough care. I don't know, she admitted. I honestly don't know. Frederick opened his eyes. The gray was washed with red, his face blotchy and devastated and still, somehow, the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. I can't watch you destroy everything I've built, he said slowly. But I also can't pretend that what my company did was acceptable. That the people who died, your father, didn't matter. So what are you saying? Frederick took a long breath. Let it out. I'm saying I need time. To think. To figure out what accountability looks like when the person demanding it is also the person you love. He stepped backward toward the door. I can't be around you right now, Dom. It hurts too much. Frederick. I'm not saying goodbye. His hand found the doorknob. I'm saying I need to understand who I'm supposed to be now. And I can't do that with you looking at me like that. Like what? Like you still love me. His voice cracked on the last word. Like there might still be a way forward. Is there? Frederick paused at the threshold, silhouetted against the darkening Sedona sky. I don't know, he said. But I hope so. For both our sakes. Then he was gone. Dom stood alone in her studio, surrounded by unfinished sculptures and 2 years of shattered plans. Her phone buzzed. Legal team, Ms. Amerson, we need confirmation by October 15th. Should we proceed with filing? Dom stared at the message. Then she looked at the photograph of her father she kept on her workbench, Marcus Amerson at 60, grinning in front of his classroom, surrounded by students who adored him. What would you want, Daddy? She asked silently. Justice? Or love? And what if I can't have both? The photograph didn't answer. Outside, the October moon rose over Cathedral Rock, indifferent to the humans struggling beneath it. And Domitila Amerson, $1 short of destroying everything, had never felt more alone. Dom's art studio, Sedona, 3:47 a.m. Sleep had become a stranger. Dom sat on the cold concrete floor of her studio, her father's dog tags clutched in one hand, a half-empty bottle of wine abandoned beside her. The sculpture of the two reaching figures loomed above her in the darkness, unfinished, accusing, a monument to everything she'd broken. Frederick's face kept appearing behind her eyelids every time she closed them. Not the angry face from yesterday, but the soft one. The vulnerable one. The one that had looked at her on Airport Mesa and said "I love you" like the words were sacred. She destroyed that face. Turned it into something hard and wounded and gone. Her phone had 17 missed calls. Nina. Her legal team. 3 investors wanting updates. 1 unknown number that might have been a reporter. Somehow, word was starting to leak that something big was coming for Jackson Pharmaceuticals. She hadn't answered any of them. What would she say? Sorry, I fell in love with the target and now I can't remember why justice mattered more than his smile? Her father's photograph watched her from the workbench. Marcus Amerson, forever frozen at 60, forever grinning, forever ignorant of the daughter who would fail him 2 years after his death. I'm sorry, Daddy, Dom whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry. The photograph didn't answer. Photographs never did. Dom took another sip of wine and wondered if this was what drowning felt like, surrounded by air but unable to breathe anyway. October 7, 2024. Frederick's residence, Sedona. Frederick hadn't left his house in 2 days. The curtains were drawn against the relentless Arizona sun. Dishes piled in the sink, something that would have horrified his mother, who'd kept their tiny Michigan kitchen spotless despite working 2 jobs. His phone sat silent on the counter, turned off since the confrontation at Dom's studio. He'd spent 48 hours reading. Not the documents Harrison had given him, he'd memorized those already. Instead, he'd found every article, every interview, every social media post related to OxyRenew's victims. The families who'd spoken out. The lawsuits that had been quietly settled. The congressional hearings where Jackson Pharmaceuticals lawyers had deflected and delayed and denied. 847 names. He'd written them all down in a leather journal, filling page after page with people he'd never met but had helped kill. Marcus Amerson was on page 32. Beloved father. Dedicated teacher. Veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq and came home whole, only to be destroyed by a medication prescribed for back pain. Frederick had read that sentence 14 times. Each time, he saw Dom's face, her tears on August 14th, her hands clutching his shirt, her voice breaking as she said he was my best friend. He understood now. God help him, he finally understood. His phone sat dark and silent, but he couldn't bring himself to turn it on. Couldn't face whatever messages might be waiting, from Harrison, from his lawyers, from the woman he still loved despite everything. Instead, he opened his laptop and began composing an email he wasn't sure he'd ever send. To Dr. Elise Thornton. Subject, I need to talk to you. Elise, I know we haven't spoken since 2022. I know you have every reason to ignore this message. But I need to understand what happened, really understand, not the sanitized version the board gave me. You tried to warn me about OxyRenew. I didn't listen. I trusted the wrong people, and 847 families paid the price. One of those families just destroyed me. And I think I deserved it. If you're willing to talk, I'm ready to listen. Finally. Frederick. He stared at the message for 20 minutes. Then he hit send. October 8, 2024. Nina's Gallery, Tlaquepaque, Sedona. You look like death. Nina Loran stood in the doorway of her back office, arms crossed, her 36-year-old face arranged in an expression that was equal parts sympathy and frustration. She'd been Dom's best friend for 12 years, long enough to recognize the particular devastation of a woman who'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping, and stopped answering her phone. Dom sat hunched in a corner chair, still wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago. Thanks. Very supportive. I'm not here to be supportive. I'm here to knock some sense into you. Nina closed the door and perched on the edge of her desk. You've been ignoring everyone. Your legal team is panicking. Your investors are asking questions. And you, she gestured at Dom's disheveled appearance. You're falling apart. I'm not falling apart. I'm just falling apart, Nina finished. I've known you since we were 23, Dom. I know what your falling apart looks like. Dom pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push back the tears that seemed permanently lodged behind them now. He walked out, Nina. He found out everything, and he walked out, and the look on his face, her voice cracked. I've never hurt anyone like that before. Never. He's not innocent in this. His company. He pulled the drug. Dom looked up, something fierce flickering in her exhausted eyes. The second he had confirmed data, he pulled it. He didn't know what the board was hiding. He's been funding addiction treatment centers anonymously for 2 years because he couldn't live with what happened. Nina was quiet for a moment. And you believe him? I saw his face when he talked about it. 6 months ago, at Red Rock Crossing. He didn't know who I was, he had no reason to lie, and he told me about the people who died like he was confessing to a priest. Dom's hands trembled. He called it the weight he carries. Said he wakes up knowing people are dead because he wasn't paying enough attention. That doesn't absolve him. No. It doesn't. Dom stood abruptly, pacing the small office like a caged animal. But it complicates things. It makes him human. Flawed and guilty and trying to do better. And I fell in love with that man, the one who's trying, not the monster I needed him to be. Nina watched her pace, something softening in her expression. What would your father say? She asked quietly. Dom stopped. Turned. What? Marcus. If he were here right now, if he could see everything you've done, everything you've become, what would he tell you? Dom's eyes filled with tears she couldn't fight anymore. I don't know, she whispered. I've been asking him that question for 2 years, and he never answers. Nina rose from the desk and crossed to her friend, pulling her into a tight embrace. Maybe, she said softly, you've been asking the wrong question. What do you mean? You keep asking what your father would want you to do. But Marcus is gone, baby. He's not coming back, no matter how much justice you deliver. Nina pulled back, holding Dom at arm's length. Maybe the real question is, what do you want? Not the grieving daughter. Not the warrior. You. Dom had no answer. She'd spent so long becoming a weapon that she'd forgotten she was also a person. October 10, 2024. A coffee shop in Sedona. Frederick had chosen a public place deliberately. He didn't trust himself to have this conversation in private. Too much emotion, too many years of avoidance, too much risk that he'd either break down completely or say things he couldn't take back. Elise Thornton arrived exactly on time. She looked good, different from the woman he'd almost married, but good. Her brown hair was shorter now, her posture more confident. She'd left Jackson Pharmaceuticals as a defeated whistleblower. She'd rebuilt herself as something stronger. Frederick. She slid into the booth across from him, her expression guarded. I wasn't sure you'd actually be here. I wasn't sure either. Silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient noise of espresso machines and casual conversations that seemed impossibly trivial. Your email surprised me, Elise finally said. After everything, the way your lawyers handled my departure, I didn't think you'd ever want to hear my side. I was a coward. Frederick's voice was flat, emotionless, because anything else would shatter him. I let the board convince me you were overreacting. That the data was inconclusive. That your concerns were, he stopped, shame choking the words. The concerns of an hysterical woman. Elise's smile was bitter. That's what Richard called me in that meeting. Right before he had security escort me out. Richard is gone. I forced his resignation last year, along with most of the board. I know. I read about it. Elise studied him with eyes that had once looked at him with love, now clinical with assessment. You've changed. Have I? The Frederick I knew in 2022 wouldn't have sent that email. Wouldn't have asked to understand. He would have let his lawyers handle everything and pretended the ugly parts didn't exist. Frederick's hands clenched around his coffee cup. The Frederick you knew in 2022 was watching people die and telling himself it wasn't his fault. And now? Now I know it was my fault. Maybe not directly, maybe I didn't sign off on the falsified data, but I was the CEO. I created the culture that let it happen. I trusted people who didn't deserve trust because trusting them was easier than questioning them. Elise was quiet for a long moment. What do you want from me, Frederick? She finally asked. Absolution? I can't give you that. Forgiveness? I'm not sure I have it. I want documentation. Frederick met her eyes steadily. Everything you tried to show me in 2022. The safety data the board buried. The internal emails. The proof that this wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate. Why? Because I'm going to destroy my own company. The words came out flat, certain. I'm going to tear it apart from the inside. And I need the evidence to do it right. Elise stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Frederick leaned forward. There's a lawsuit coming. A big one. And when it hits, I want to be on the right side of it. I want to give those 847 families everything they need to get justice. Even if it costs me everything I've built. Including your fortune? Your reputation? Everything you've worked for? My mother would have hated what Jackson Pharmaceuticals became. Frederick's voice cracked slightly. She wanted me to help people, not kill them. And if burning it all down is the only way to make things right? He shrugged. Then I'll light the match myself. Elise was quiet for a long, stretching moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. I've kept everything, she said quietly. For 2 years, I've been waiting for someone to actually want the truth. She slid the drive across the table. Frederick picked it up with trembling hands. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet. Elise stood, gathering her bag. You're about to blow up your entire life. The question is whether you're doing it for the right reasons, or just because a woman broke your heart. Frederick thought about Dom. Her tears. Her confession. The way she'd looked at him like he was both the villain and the answer. Both, he admitted. But does the reason matter if the result is justice? Elise smiled, a real smile this time, tinged with something that might have been respect. No, she said. I don't suppose it does. She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Frederick stared at the USB drive in his palm, a digital bomb that could destroy everything he'd built. Then he slipped it into his pocket and pulled out his phone. October 10, 2024, later that evening. A different coffee shop in Sedona. Frederick wasn't sure why he'd asked to meet Patricia Amerson. He'd found her information easily enough. She was still listed as Marcus Amerson's widow in the class action paperwork Harrison had compiled. Still living in the same Brooklyn brownstone where she'd raised her daughter. Still, according to her sparse social media presence, attending church every Sunday and posting photographs of sunsets. She'd come to Sedona when he'd asked. Said she had things to discuss with her daughter anyway. Agreed to meet him without knowing who he was. He hadn't told her his full name. Just Frederick. A friend of Domitila's. It wasn't entirely a lie. Patricia Amerson was 64 years old and carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had survived things that should have destroyed her. Her skin was deep brown, her hair silver gray, her eyes the same shape as her daughter's. Looking at her felt like looking at Dom in 30 years. Frederick's chest ached. Thank you for meeting me, he said as she settled into the booth across from him. You said you're a friend of my daughter's. Patricia's voice was warm but cautious. Domitila hasn't mentioned you. We've been close. For about 6 months. Frederick hesitated. She doesn't know I'm here. Patricia studied him with sharp, knowing eyes. You're the man, aren't you? The one she's been dancing around on the phone. Every time I ask about her personal life, she changes the subject. I might be that man. Or I might have been. Which is it? Frederick took a breath. Let it out slowly. That's what I'm trying to figure out. They sat in silence for a moment. Patricia ordered tea. Frederick ordered coffee he knew he wouldn't drink. Tell me about Marcus, Frederick finally said. If you're willing. Not the public story, not the veteran, the teacher, the headlines. Tell me who he was when no one was watching. Patricia's eyes went soft with grief, the permanent kind that never fully heals, just becomes manageable enough to carry. Marcus was? She smiled, and for a moment Frederick saw Dom's smile in the curve of her lips. He was the most stubborn, gentle, ridiculous man I've ever known. He proposed to me 3 times before I said yes, kept showing up at my mother's house with sunflowers because I mentioned once that I liked them. Drove her crazy. Frederick found himself smiling despite everything. He sounds persistent. Persistent like a hurricane. Patricia's laugh was watery. He used to say that love wasn't about grand gestures, it was about showing up. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Domitila mentioned that he believed in her art when no one else did. He framed her first drawing. She was 4 years old, drew a crooked stick figure of our family, and he put it in a gold frame like it belonged in a museum. Patricia's voice caught. He always saw the best in people. Even when they couldn't see it themselves. Frederick's hands tightened around his coffee cup. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. And you're going to hate me for it. Patricia's gaze sharpened. What? My full name is Frederick Jackson. I'm the CEO of Jackson Pharmaceuticals. He forced himself to hold her eyes, to witness the recognition dawn, followed by something darker. My company made the drug that killed your husband. Silence. Patricia's face had gone still, her teacup frozen halfway to her lips. I see, she said finally, setting the cup down with exaggerated care. And why are you here, Mr. Jackson? To apologize? To ease your conscience? To make yourself feel better about what you did to my family? No. Frederick's voice was steady despite the trembling in his hands. I'm here because I love your daughter. And I'm trying to understand whether that means anything at all. Patricia stared at him for a long, terrible moment. Then she laughed, harsh and broken and utterly unexpected. You love her, she repeated. You, the man whose company killed her father, love the woman who's been planning to destroy you for 2 years. You know about her plan? I suspected. Dom's never been subtle when she's angry. She gets that from me. Patricia leaned back, something shifting in her expression. I didn't know the details, she's been protecting me, thinking I'm too fragile to handle it, but I knew she was doing something. Working toward something. She's had that look in her eyes since the funeral. That, I'm going to fix this if it kills me, look. The lawsuit is real. She's raised almost $40 million. She could destroy my company with a phone call. And yet here you are. Drinking coffee with the widow of the man you killed. Asking about sunflowers and stick figure drawings. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Why? Frederick had asked himself that question 100 times. Now, facing the woman whose husband he'd helped kill, the answer finally crystallized. Because I need to know if there's a version of justice that doesn't require me to lose her, he said quietly. And if there isn't, if the only way to make things right is to let her burn everything down, then I need to know that too. Patricia was quiet for a long time. Marcus wouldn't want this, she finally said. Want what? Dom, destroying herself for revenge. Carrying this weight until it crushes her. Patricia's voice was fierce now, a mother's protective anger surfacing. She thinks she's honoring him, but she's losing herself in the process. I've watched it happen for 2 years, watched my bright, creative, joyful daughter become something cold and sharp. She's not cold. Frederick thought of Dom's tears at Airport Mesa. Her laughter at Red Rock Crossing. The way she'd whispered I love you too like a confession. She's hurt. There's a difference. You see that? Patricia leaned forward. Most people don't. Most people look at her now and see the armor, not what's underneath. I fell in love with what's underneath. Even knowing what she was planning? I didn't know. Not then. Frederick met Patricia's eyes. But knowing now. I understand. If someone killed my mother and got away with it, I don't know that I'd be any different. Silence stretched between them, different now. Less hostile. Something approaching understanding. What are you going to do? Patricia asked quietly. I'm going to destroy my company myself, Frederick said. Give her everything she needs to get justice. Not because she asked, because it's right. Because 847 people are dead, and someone needs to be held accountable, and if it has to be me, then so be it. And Dom? That's up to her. Frederick's voice cracked slightly. I can't make her forgive me. I can't make her choose me. But I can make sure she doesn't have to destroy herself to get what she deserves. Patricia studied him for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and placed her weathered hand over his. Marcus would have liked you, she said quietly. If things had been different. If the circumstances had been. He would have liked your stubbornness. Your willingness to show up. Frederick's eyes burned with unshed tears. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm so sorry for what my company did to your family. I know you are. Patricia squeezed his hand. Now prove it. October 11, 2024. Dom's hotel room, Sedona. The knock at the door came at 7 a.m. Dom had finally fallen into a restless sleep around 4, her dreams haunted by reaching hands that never quite touched. She stumbled to the door in sweatpants and a faded Howard University t-shirt, expecting Nina or maybe room service she hadn't ordered. She opened the door. Patricia Amerson stood in the hallway, travel bag in hand, expression unreadable. Ma? Dom blinked, certain she was still dreaming. What are you? How did you? I took the red eye. And your friend Nina told me where you were staying. Patricia pushed past her into the room, surveying the chaos of empty wine bottles, scattered papers, and unmade bed with a mother's practiced assessment. You look terrible. Thanks. Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. Patricia set down her bag and turned to face her daughter. We need to talk. Something in her voice made Dom's stomach clench. Ma, whatever this is about. I met him. Patricia's words landed like stones. Frederick Jackson. We had coffee yesterday evening. Dom felt the blood drain from her face. You what? He asked to meet me. Said he was a friend of yours. Patricia's eyes were sharp, seeing everything Dom had tried to hide. He told me the truth. About who he is. About you. About the lawsuit. Dom sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Ma, I can explain. You don't need to explain. I've known something was going on for 2 years. You think I didn't notice my daughter transforming from an artist into a warrior? You think I didn't see the fire in your eyes every time anyone mentioned pharmaceuticals or pain medication or, Patricia's voice cracked. You think I didn't know you were doing something for your father? I didn't want to burden you. Burden me. Patricia sat beside her on the bed, taking Dom's hands in her own. Baby, I'm your mother. Your burdens are my burdens. That's how this works. Dom's eyes filled with tears. She'd been fighting for days. He killed Daddy, Ma. Not personally, but his company, his drug. I know what his company did. Patricia's voice was fierce. I buried my husband because of that drug. I know exactly what Jackson Pharmaceuticals took from us. Then how can you? Dom stopped, unable to complete the question. How can I what? Talk to him? See him as human? Patricia released her hands and stood, pacing to the window that overlooked Cathedral Rock. Because Marcus wouldn't want this for you. Dom's breath caught. Ma. He wouldn't. Patricia turned, silhouetted against the morning light. Your father loved you more than anything in this world. And if he saw what you've become, this cold, calculating woman driven by revenge, he would be heartbroken. I'm not driven by revenge. I'm driven by justice. Is there a difference? Patricia's voice was gentle now. When justice requires you to destroy the man you love. When getting it means losing yourself. Dom couldn't answer. The question had been eating at her for weeks. Frederick Jackson is responsible for your father's death, Patricia continued. That's true. But he's also a man who pulled the drug the moment he understood what it was doing. A man who's been quietly trying to make amends for 2 years. A man who sat across from me, the widow of someone he helped kill, and asked about sunflowers and stick figures because he wanted to understand who Marcus really was. Why would he do that? Because he loves you. Patricia crossed back to the bed, sitting beside her daughter again. And because he's trying to figure out whether love can survive what's between you. Dom's tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. I don't know if it can, she whispered. I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I can forgive myself. Forgiveness isn't something you know, baby. It's something you choose. Patricia wiped her daughter's tears with gentle thumbs, the same gesture she'd used when Dom was a child, scraped knees and bruised feelings and a mother's love making everything bearable. And whatever you choose, I'll support you. But I need you to hear something first. What? Your father's last words. Patricia's voice trembled. I never told you. I couldn't, it was too painful. But you need to hear them now. Dom's heart stopped. Ma. He was lucid at the end. Just for a moment, before the overdose took him completely. He looked at me, and he said, Patricia's tears fell freely now. He said, tell my baby girl not to let this make her hard. Tell her to keep making beautiful things. Tell her love is the only revenge that matters. Dom broke. 2 years of rage. 2 years of planning. 2 years of becoming someone her father would barely recognize, it all shattered in a single moment, releasing a grief she'd been holding at bay with anger and purpose. She sobbed into her mother's shoulder like a child, and Patricia held her, rocking gently, murmuring the same words she'd used when Dom was small and the world felt too big and scary. I've got you, baby. I've got you. Just let it out. And Dom did. October 13, 2024. 11:47 p.m. 2 emails sat unsent in 2 different outboxes, separated by miles but connected by something stronger than distance. In her hotel room, Dom stared at her laptop screen, cursor blinking after 2 words. 2. Legal team. Subject, authorization to proceed. File it. Her finger hovered over the send button. Filing the lawsuit was still the right thing. 847 families deserved their day in court, deserved accountability, deserved to know that someone had fought for them. But she was adding something else. A statement to be released simultaneously with the lawsuit. Something that had taken her 3 hours to write. Frederick Jackson is not the villain of this story. A system that prioritizes profit over people is. Mr. Jackson pulled OxyRenew the moment he confirmed its dangers. He has spent 2 years quietly funding addiction treatment centers and victim support programs. While his company must be held accountable, he personally represents what accountability should look like, a willingness to face hard truths and try to make amends. I came to Sedona to destroy him. I fell in love with him instead. That doesn't erase what his company did to my father and 846 others. But it does complicate the narrative I'd written, where he was a monster and I was a hero. The truth is messy. It always is. Justice and forgiveness can coexist. I believe that now. And I hope, when this is over, we can find a way forward that honors both. She read the words again. And again. Then she hit send. Across town, in his darkened living room, Frederick stared at his own laptop screen. 2. Harrison Chen. Subject, instructions for tomorrow. Harrison. Schedule a press conference for 10 a.m. on October 14th. I'll be making a public statement regarding Jackson Pharmaceuticals, the OxyRenew crisis, and my personal accountability. Also attached, Elise Thornton's documentation proving the board knowingly concealed safety data. I want it released to all major news outlets simultaneously with my statement. I'm stepping down as CEO. I'm providing full cooperation with any legal proceedings. And I'm establishing a $50 million compensation fund for victims' families, separate from whatever the lawsuit awards. This is the right thing to do. I should have done it 2 years ago. One more thing, I need you to transfer $1 to Domitila Amerson's Memory Garden account. Wire it tonight. She'll understand. Thank you for 15 years of friendship. Thank you for having my back even when I didn't deserve it. Frederick. He read the email once. Then he hit send before he could change his mind. His phone buzzed immediately. Harrison, probably, responding with shock or questions or both. But the notification wasn't from Harrison. It was a news alert. Breaking, massive class action lawsuit filed against Jackson Pharmaceuticals, 847 victims represented, full documentation released. Frederick stared at the headline, his heart pounding. She'd done it. Dom had actually filed the lawsuit. And according to the article preview, she'd included a statement. Something about accountability and forgiveness and a system that prioritized profit over people. Something about falling in love. Frederick's hands trembled as he opened the full article. Read her words. Read them again. I came to Sedona to destroy him. I fell in love with him instead. She'd chosen justice. But she'd also chosen him. Or at least, she'd left the door open. Frederick closed his laptop and looked out the window at Cathedral Rock, barely visible against the moonlit sky. Tomorrow, he would destroy his own empire. Give her everything she needed. Face the consequences of 2 years of avoidance. And then, maybe, he would find out if love could survive the wreckage. His phone buzzed again. Bank notification, wire transfer complete, $1 sent to Memory Garden Foundation. $1. The dollar she'd never been able to type. He'd given it to her anyway. Jackson Pharmaceuticals headquarters, Phoenix, Arizona, 9:47 a.m. The press room was packed. Cameras from every major news network lined the back wall, their lights creating a harsh glare against the Jackson Pharmaceuticals logo, a logo that would mean something very different by the end of the day. Reporters filled every seat, notebooks open, phones recording, anticipation crackling through the air like static before a storm. Harrison Chin stood in the wings, watching the chaos with a mixture of dread and something that might have been admiration. In 15 years of friendship, he'd never seen Frederick Jackson do anything this reckless. Or this right. At exactly 9:58 a.m., Frederick emerged from the side door. He looked different. Not just tired, though he was clearly exhausted, dark circles carved beneath his gray eyes, but transformed. Lighter, somehow, despite the weight of what he was about to do. Like a man who had finally stopped running from his own reflection. He wore a simple navy suit. No tie. His mother's wedding ring, the only piece of jewelry she'd owned, hung on a chain around his neck, visible at his open collar. He'd told Harrison that morning, I want her with me. For accountability. Now, standing at the podium with 50 cameras pointed at his face, Frederick Jackson took a breath and began. Thank you all for coming. I'll be making a statement, and then I'll take questions. I ask that you let me finish before interrupting. What I have to say is comprehensive. He gripped the podium's edges, steadying himself. 2 years ago, my company released a pain medication called OxyRenew. We marketed it as a breakthrough, safe, effective, non-addictive. We were wrong. Not just wrong, we were lied to. Our internal safety team raised concerns during the trial phase. Those concerns were buried by members of my board who prioritized profits over people. He paused, letting the words land. I was the CEO. The buck stopped with me. And while I didn't personally falsify the data or suppress the warnings, I created a culture where such suppression was possible. I trusted advisors who didn't deserve trust. I signed off on marketing materials I should have questioned. And because of those failures, my failures, 847 people died. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reporters exchanged glances. This morning, documentation was released to every major news outlet proving what I've just said. Emails, internal memos, safety reports that were hidden from me and from regulators. The individuals responsible are named. Legal proceedings against them will follow. Frederick's voice cracked slightly. He steadied himself. But I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to take responsibility. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a single sheet of paper. Effective immediately, I am resigning as CEO of Jackson Pharmaceuticals. I am also announcing the creation of the Marcus Amerson Foundation for Addiction Treatment and Pharmaceutical Accountability, named for one of OxyRenew's victims, a decorated veteran and beloved teacher whose daughter has been fighting for justice for 2 years. Cameras flashed like lightning. The foundation will be funded with $50 million from my personal assets, not the company's, mine. This is separate from any settlement or legal judgment. It's separate from the class action lawsuit that was filed yesterday. This is my personal accountability. My attempt, inadequate as it is, to honor the people who died because I wasn't paying attention. Frederick looked directly into the nearest camera. To the 847 families, I am so deeply sorry. Nothing I do will bring your loved ones back. Nothing will undo the suffering my company caused. But I promise you this, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. Not through lawyers or PR statements or carefully managed philanthropy, but through genuine action. Genuine change. Genuine accountability. He paused. Swallowed. And to one family in particular, to Domitila Amerson and Patricia Amerson, I owe a debt I can never repay. Marcus Amerson deserved better. His wife and daughter deserved better. The fact that they've shown me grace despite having every reason to hate me it's more than I deserve. His voice dropped, rough with emotion. I love your daughter, Mrs. Amerson. I know that complicates things. I know it doesn't make sense. But I do. And if she'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that love can exist alongside accountability. That forgiveness and justice aren't opposites, they're partners. Frederick folded the paper and slipped it back into his jacket. I'll take questions now. The room exploded. Dom's hotel room, Sedona, 10:23 a.m. Dom watched the press conference on her laptop, her mother beside her on the bed, both of them frozen in disbelief. On screen, Frederick was answering questions with calm honesty, admitting fault, naming names, refusing to hide behind corporate lawyers or carefully worded denials. He'd mentioned her by name. Mentioned her father by name. Called Marcus a victim and a hero in the same breath. Ma, Dom whispered, unable to tear her eyes from the screen. He's destroying himself. No, baby. Patricia's voice was thick with tears. He's rebuilding himself. There's a difference. A reporter on screen asked, Mr. Jackson, you mentioned Domitila Amerson, the woman behind the class action lawsuit. Can you comment on your relationship with her? Frederick's face softened into something achingly vulnerable. We met by accident 7 months ago. Neither of us knew who the other was. By the time we found out? He paused. I fell in love with her before I understood why she came to Sedona. And she fell in love with me before she could destroy me. Now we're both trying to figure out whether love can survive the truth. And can it? The reporter pressed. Frederick looked directly into the camera, Dom realized, directly at her. I hope so, he said quietly. I'm betting everything on it. The press conference continued, but Dom wasn't listening anymore. Her phone buzzed. Frederick, Cathedral Rock. Where we met. I'll wait as long as you need. Dom stared at the message, her heart hammering. Patricia placed a gentle hand on her arm. Go, her mother said. Ma, I don't know if I can. Yes you do. Patricia's eyes were fierce with love. You've been fighting for 2 years, baby. Maybe it's time to let yourself be found. Dom looked at the screen, where Frederick was still fielding questions, still tearing his empire apart piece by piece. For her. For the families. For the man he wanted to become. She grabbed her jacket and ran. Cathedral Rock, Sedona, 11:47 a.m. The trail was quiet. October in Sedona meant fewer tourists, cooler temperatures, a quality of light that made the red rocks glow like embers. Dom climbed the same path she'd taken 7 months ago, her father's dog tags bouncing against her chest with every step. She found him at their overlook, the hidden one, through the gap between the boulders that no guidebook mentioned. He was sitting on the same flat rock where they'd watched their first sunrise together, his back to her, shoulders hunched against the canyon wind. Her boots crunched on gravel. Frederick turned. He looked wrecked, exhausted, tear-streaked, still wearing the suit from the press conference with the jacket now draped beside him. But when he saw her, something in his face cracked open. Hope and terror and love, all tangled together in an expression that made Dom's chest ache. You came, he said. I came. She crossed to the rock and sat beside him, close enough to touch, far enough to think. Below them, the valley stretched in shades of rust and amber, impossibly vast, impossibly beautiful. I watched the press conference, Dom said quietly. I know. I was talking to you the whole time. Frederick's voice was rough. I wasn't sure you'd hear it. Wasn't sure you'd care. You named my father. Her throat tightened. You said his name in front of the whole world. He deserved that. He deserved so much more than what my company gave him. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything unsaid. You sent me $1, Dom finally said. Last night. $1. Frederick's lips curved into something almost like a smile. You were $1 short. I figured, if I couldn't stop you from getting justice, at least I could help you complete it. You didn't try to stop me. No. He turned to face her fully, gray eyes steady and sure. I stopped trying to protect myself the moment I realized protecting myself meant hurting you. Hurting the families. Hurting everyone who trusted me to be better. The lawsuit will destroy your company. Good. Frederick's voice was fierce. It should have been destroyed 2 years ago. I was just too much of a coward to do it myself. Dom studied his face, the same face she'd fallen in love with at Red Rock Crossing, the same face she'd wanted to destroy when she first learned his name. He was still beautiful. Still haunted. But something had changed. The shadows behind his eyes had shifted, lightened. He looked like a man who had finally stopped running. My mother told me something, Dom said slowly. Something my father said before he died. Frederick's breath caught. What? He said to tell me not to let this make me hard. To keep making beautiful things. Dom's voice cracked. He said love is the only revenge that matters. Tears spilled down Frederick's cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. Your father sounds like he was an extraordinary man. He was. Dom reached out, slowly, tentatively, and took Frederick's hand. His fingers were cold. She warmed them between her palms. He would have liked you, I think. Eventually. Once he got past the wanting to kill you part. A broken laugh escaped Frederick's lips. I would have deserved it. Maybe. But you're trying to be better. That's all any of us can do. Silence again. But different now. Softer. I read your statement, Frederick said quietly. The one you released with the lawsuit. I meant every word. Even the part about falling in love? Dom met his eyes. Held them. Especially that part. Frederick's hand tightened around hers, not desperately, but steadily. An anchor. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to love someone I've hurt so badly. How to build something with a woman whose father I helped kill. I don't know if it's even possible. Neither do I. Dom scooted closer, until their shoulders touched. But my father believed in broken things becoming beautiful. He built his whole life on that principle. And you? What do you believe? Dom thought about the past 2 years. The rage. The planning. The cold calculation that had consumed her until Frederick Jackson walked into her life and ruined everything. She thought about her mother's words. Her father's last message. The sculpture still waiting in her studio, 2 figures reaching toward each other across an impossible gap. I believe, she said slowly, that some gaps are meant to be crossed. Even when crossing them seems impossible. Frederick exhaled, a shuddering, releasing sound, like a man setting down a weight he'd carried for far too long. I love you, he said. I know it's complicated. I know there's still so much to figure out, the lawsuit, the families, how we move forward when everything between us started with deception. But I love you, Domitila Amerson. I loved you at Cathedral Rock when I didn't know your name. I loved you at Red Rock Crossing when you asked me to tell you a secret. I loved you at Airport Mesa when you let me hold you while you cried. His voice broke. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that my love isn't just words. That it's action. That it's showing up, every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Dom's tears fell freely now, releasing 2 years of grief, 2 years of rage, 2 years of becoming someone she barely recognized. That's what my mother said my father believed, she whispered. That love is about showing up. Then let me show up. Please. Frederick's free hand rose to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears. Let me earn this. Let me earn you. Dom closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. She thought about justice. About accountability. About the 847 families who would finally get their day in court. She thought about forgiveness. About healing. About the possibility that broken pieces could become something new. She thought about her father, who would have wanted her to live, not just survive, but live. Yes, she whispered. Frederick's breath caught. Yes? Yes. Dom opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with everything she had. Show up. Earn it. And I'll do the same. Frederick kissed her. It wasn't like their first kiss, tentative, stolen, weighted with secrets neither of them was telling. This kiss was honest. Fierce. A declaration and a promise tangled together, tasting like tears and dust and the wild desert wind. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing ragged, Dom laughed, a real laugh, bright and startled, the first genuine laugh she'd released in weeks. What? Frederick asked, his own smile spreading. I spent 2 years planning to destroy you, Dom said. Raised $40 million. Built a whole operation. And in the end, the thing that took you down was love? Frederick finished. Accountability. Dom grinned. You destroyed yourself before I could. You stole my revenge. Sorry about that. No, you're not. No, Frederick agreed, kissing her again. I'm really not. Later that afternoon. Cathedral Rock, Sedona, 4:47 p.m. They'd spent hours talking. Not just about the lawsuit or the foundation or the complicated logistics of building a relationship on a foundation of grief and deception. They talked about everything, childhood memories, favorite foods, the dreams they'd abandoned and the ones they still clung to. Frederick learned that Dom's grandmother had taught her to make feijoada, that she'd wanted to be a veterinarian before she discovered sculpture, that she talked to her father's photograph every night before bed. Dom learned that Frederick had failed his first business course in college, that he played terrible guitar when no one was listening, that he'd never actually learned to cook despite owning a kitchen that cost more than most people's houses. They talked until the sun began its descent, painting the red rocks in shades of amber and rose, the same colors as the first sunrise they'd shared. "I have something for you," Frederick said as the light turned golden. "I was going to wait, but I don't think either of us needs more waiting." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Dom's heart stopped. "Frederick, before you say anything, just let me explain." His hands trembled slightly as he opened the box. "I had this made 3 weeks ago. Before the confrontation. Before everything fell apart. I was planning to ask you to move in with me, that was the something important I kept mentioning." Inside the box sat a ring unlike anything Dom had ever seen. The band was a twist of rose gold and something darker, gunmetal, maybe, or aged bronze. At its center, instead of a diamond, 3 small stones formed a cluster, a deep amber, a black onyx, and a clear quartz that caught the dying light. "The amber is for Sedona," Frederick said quietly. "Where we met. The onyx is for grief, your father's, the family's, the weight we both carry. And the quartz." He met her eyes. "The quartz is for clarity. For truth. For the way forward." Dom's vision blurred with tears. "The band," she whispered. "The darker metal. What is it?" Frederick's voice cracked. "Your father's dog tags. The ones you wear every day." He swallowed hard. "I asked your mother for permission. She gave me one of them, the spare, from his military records, and I had a jeweler melt it down and weave it into the band." Dom couldn't breathe. "You put my father in the ring. I wanted him with you. Always. Not as a weight to carry, but as..." Frederick searched for the words. "As a blessing. A presence. A reminder that love doesn't end when someone dies, it transforms." Dom reached out with trembling fingers and touched the ring. The darker metal was smooth, warm, carrying something she couldn't name but could absolutely feel. Her father. Her daddy. Woven into a promise of forever. "Is this..." She had to stop. "Start again. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to let me show up. Every day. For the rest of our lives." Frederick's gray eyes were soft, certain, blazing with an intensity that stole her breath. "I'm asking you to build something with me, not despite the broken pieces between us, but with them. Because of them. Frederick. Marry me, Domitila Amerson." His voice was rough with emotion. "Let me spend the rest of my life earning this. Earning you. Making beautiful things from broken pieces, just like your father taught you." Dom looked at the ring. At the man holding it. At the red rocks blazing behind him, witnesses to a love story that should have been impossible. She thought about justice. She thought about forgiveness. She thought about her father's last words, "Love is the only revenge that matters." "Yes," she whispered. Frederick's face transformed, joy and relief and overwhelming love breaking through like sunrise. "Yes? Yes." Dom laughed through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll build with you. Yes, I'll..." He kissed her before she could finish, sliding the ring onto her finger with hands that shook with emotion. The metal was warm against her skin, warmer than it should have been, as if something more than physics lived in that band. When they finally broke apart, Dom held up her hand, watching the amber stone catch the dying light. "My father would have loved this," she said softly. "I hope so." Frederick wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "I hope he's watching. I hope he knows that his daughter, his brilliant, fierce, extraordinary daughter, is going to be okay." Dom leaned into his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling her father's presence in the metal against her finger. "He knows," she whispered. "Somehow, he knows." Epilogue. June 14, 2025. The Memory Garden, Sedona, Arizona. 8 months later, on the 3rd anniversary of Marcus Amerson's death, the Memory Garden opened. It sprawled across 2 acres of Sedona red rock, purchased with funds from the settlement that had finally concluded 3 months prior. 847 sculptures stood in winding paths through the desert landscape, each one unique, each one honoring a specific victim, each one created by Domitila Amerson Jackson and a team of artists she'd assembled from across the country. Marcus Amerson's sculpture stood at the garden's heart, a 7-foot bronze of a man dissolving into birds, titled Release. The same piece Frederick had stared at in Nina's gallery over a year ago, when neither of them knew what was coming. The dedication ceremony drew hundreds of people, victim families from across the nation, reporters, local officials, and supporters who'd followed the story from lawsuit to settlement to this moment of collective healing. Patricia Amerson spoke first, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "My husband believed that beauty could be found in broken things," she said, standing before her husband's sculpture. "That's what he taught our daughter. That's what he lived every day. And today, looking at what Domitila and Frederick have built, I know he was right. She turned to look at Dom and Frederick, seated in the front row, their hands intertwined. Marcus would have loved this, Patricia continued. Not the fame or the attention, he never cared about that. But the healing. The community. The way strangers who shared the same grief can find each other and become family. Her voice broke slightly. He would have been proud of his daughter. And he would have been proud of his son-in-law, too. Dom squeezed Frederick's hand, tears streaming down her face. They'd been married 2 months ago, a small ceremony at Cathedral Rock, just family and close friends. Nina had officiated. Harrison had served as Frederick's best man. Patricia had walked Dom down the path where she'd first met the man who would become her husband. The ring with Marcus's dog tags had stayed on Dom's finger throughout, catching the light with every gesture. Now, 8 months after the press conference that had changed everything, Dom rose to deliver her own remarks. She was showing, just barely, a gentle curve beneath her flowing dress that most people wouldn't notice unless they knew to look. She and Frederick had learned about the pregnancy 2 weeks ago, and they decided to announce it today, at the garden dedication. New life. New beginnings. New hope growing from grief. My father used to say that art was just love made visible, Dom began, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. That when we create something, we're really just showing the world what we care about. She gestured at the sculptures surrounding them, 847 unique expressions of loss and love and memory. Every piece in this garden represents a life. A person who mattered. A family that's still grieving, still healing, still finding their way forward. Her voice strengthened. But this garden isn't just about grief. It's about what comes after. The way we carry our loved ones with us. The way we transform our pain into something beautiful. She found Frederick's eyes in the crowd. A year ago, I came to Sedona to destroy a man. I'd spent 2 years planning his downfall, raising money, building a legal case that would tear his world apart. Dom smiled through her tears. Instead, I fell in love with him. And he fell in love with me. And together, we discovered that justice and forgiveness aren't opposites, they're partners. That accountability and grace can exist in the same heart. She touched her father's sculpture, the bronze warm beneath her palm. Daddy, I hope you're watching. I hope you can see what we've built. And I hope you know that I'm not hard anymore. I make beautiful things, just like you taught me. And I found love, the real kind, the kind that shows up every day, the kind you always said was the only revenge that matters. Her free hand drifted to her stomach. I have one more announcement. Something I wanted to share here, at the garden, with all of you. Dom's smile widened, radiant despite her tears. Frederick and I are expecting a baby. A little girl. Due in December. Gasps and applause rippled through the crowd. We're naming her Marcella Patricia Jackson, Dom continued. After both her grandparents. Because the people we've lost aren't really gone, they live on in us, in our children, in the love we keep building. Frederick rose from his seat and crossed to stand beside her, his arm wrapping around her waist. He kissed her temple, then leaned toward the microphone. I spent 2 years running from what my company did, he said quietly. Hiding behind lawyers and press releases and anonymous donations that let me pretend I was making amends without actually facing what I'd done. He looked out at the crowd, at the victim families, some of whom had glared at him with hatred when the lawsuit began, many of whom had softened over months of genuine engagement. Domitila Amerson didn't let me hide. She came for me with $40 million and the full force of her grief. And when I finally stopped running, she taught me what accountability actually looks like. He squeezed Dom's hand. It looks like showing up. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Patricia Amerson rose from her seat and joined them at the sculpture, forming a small family unit before Marcus's bronze image. My husband would have said something philosophical right now, Patricia said, her voice carrying warmth and humor. Something about butterflies or oak trees or the way broken pottery becomes more valuable when you repair it with gold. She looked at her daughter, her son-in-law, the gentle curve of her granddaughter growing beneath Dom's dress. But I think I'll just say this, love wins. Even when it shouldn't. Even when the odds are impossible and the hurt runs too deep and the obstacles seem insurmountable. Patricia's voice broke with fierce joy. Love wins. The crowd erupted into applause. And in the center of the memory garden, surrounded by 847 sculptures honoring 847 lives, 3 people held each other beneath the blazing Sedona sun, a mother who had lost her husband, a daughter who had found her purpose, and a man who had finally stopped running from his own reflection. Later that evening. Cathedral Rock, Sedona, sunset. They returned to where it all began. Just the 2 of them this time, Frederick and Dom, climbing the familiar trail as the sun began its descent. The memory garden dedication had been beautiful but exhausting, and they'd both craved the quiet of the red rocks that had witnessed their first meeting. Tired? Frederick asked as they settled onto their flat rock at the hidden overlook. Exhausted. Dom leaned into his side, her head finding its familiar place against his shoulder. Happy exhausted, though. The best kind. The garden was incredible. Your father would have been proud. I know. Dom touched the ring on her finger, the amber stone, the onyx, the quartz, and beneath them all, the bronze band woven from her father's dog tags. I felt him there. All day. Like he was walking beside me. Frederick kissed the top of her head. He probably was. They watched the sunset in comfortable silence, the same sunset they'd watched on their first morning together, when they were strangers who didn't know they were standing at the beginning of something extraordinary. Can I ask you something? Dom said eventually. Anything. That first day we met. Right here. She tilted her face up to look at him. What made you stay? When I showed up at your overlook at 6 a.m. with my sharp edges and my bad attitude, what made you decide to talk to me? Frederick was quiet for a moment, remembering. You were angry, he said finally. I could see it in every line of your body, this fierce, burning anger that you were trying to hold inside. And I thought? I know that feeling. I know what it's like to be so angry you can't breathe. So you stayed because we were both furious? I stayed because you looked at Cathedral Rock like it owed you something. Frederick smiled softly. And because when I asked you to follow me to the secret overlook, you said yes. Even though you had every reason to say no. Dom laughed. I almost didn't. I know. But you did. He turned to face her fully, gray eyes soft with love. And you've been saying yes ever since. To the coffee dates. To the hikes. To me, even when you knew the truth. Even when you should have run. I couldn't run. Dom's voice was quiet, honest. By the time I learned who you really were, I was already in love with the man who photographed sunsets and named flowers and held me while I cried. And now? Dom looked at the ring on her finger. At the sunset painting the rocks in shades of fire. At the man who had destroyed his own empire to earn her forgiveness. Now I'm in love with all of you, she said. The man who made mistakes and the man who took accountability. The man I planned to destroy and the man who helped me heal. Frederick's eyes glistened. I love you, Domitila Amerson Jackson. I love you too, Frederick Jackson. She grinned. Though technically, you're Frederick Jackson the Destroyer now. Destroyer of pharmaceutical empires. Destroyer of boardroom corruption. Destroyer of your own net worth. Worth it. He pulled her closer. Every penny. Every headline. Every lawyer's billable hour. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in colors that had no names, colors that existed only here, only now, only for them. When they finally broke apart, Dom placed Frederick's hand on her stomach, where their daughter was growing. Marcella Patricia Jackson, she whispered. I hope she has your eyes. I hope she has your fire. She'll have both. Dom smiled. And she'll have her grandfather's dog tags woven into her mother's wedding ring. And she'll grow up knowing that her parents fell in love across an impossible gap, and crossed it anyway. Frederick pressed his forehead to hers. Some love stories begin with a meeting, he said quietly. Dom finished the thought, ours began with a reckoning. And that made all the difference. Below them, Cathedral Rock blazed one final time before surrendering to twilight. Above them, the first stars emerged, ancient and patient, witnesses to 1,000 love stories and witnesses to this one too. And on a flat rock at a hidden overlook, the same rock where a broken woman had met a haunted man 7 months ago, two people who had found each other across wreckage and grief and $40 million worth of revenge sat wrapped in each other's arms, watching the night arrive. Their story hadn't ended. It was just beginning. Did Frederick and Dom's story touch your heart? If you believe love can survive even the hardest truths, drop a heart in the comments below. What would you have done in Dom's position, chosen justice or love? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another emotional love story. We post new stories every week that will make you believe in second chances, forgiveness, and the power of love.